Good afternoon from Oxford, and hello to you wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much for joining the Oxford tutorial webinar focusing on the Oxford Strategic Leadership Programme. It's great, and so very warm welcome to alumni who've joined us, to those who are thinking about coming on the programme in November, and others who are interested in the programme. My name is Tracey Camilleri. I'm an Associate Fellow at the Business School and Programme Director. I know some of you know me, but for those of you who don't, I've been the Director of the programme for 5 years. And before that, I was a tutor as well. So I spent a long time actually running tutorials. And my background is in banking and consulting and teaching, but I've become, over the years, very interested in leadership and design and direct several leadership programs here, where I draw widely from across the university for those programs. I'm joined here by Keith Ruddle, who's to my left.
Hi.
Who is a tutor on the programme, and you'll be hearing from him later, and also by Gemma Smith and Shing-Wai Wong, who are going to be making sure we don't have any technical problems and also sort of topping and tailing the webinar. So any of you do interrupt me, I don't intend this to be a monologue. And also we have 2 alumni from our May programme, Katrin Gartner, who's calling in from Berlin, who is Head of Corporate Affairs at Bertelsmann. Katrin, do you want to say hi? Are you there? Hello. Hi, Katrin.
Hello from Berlin.
Hi, thank you. And also David Radford, who's just managed to call in with some technical issues, who's in charge of brands at Allianz, and thank you both so much for calling in. David, are you there as well?
I am, yes.
Thank
Hello
you.
from the UK.
Great. So the plan for the next hour or the next 50 minutes or so is to tell you a little bit about the tutorial, which is the small group structures that we use on this programme, and why over the years we found them particularly effective for leadership teaching, and how they work, and just to hear a little bit about some experiences and so on. And then what we hope is that you will ask us some questions, whether it's about the tutorial or whether it's about the programme, or challenge us or whatever. So about 20-25 minutes of us talking about the programme, and then please do type your questions in the box at the side, and we'll do our best to answer those. So that's the plan. Before we launch into talking about the tutorials though, perhaps it's worthwhile me giving you a bit of context about the programme. It's actually been going for 33 years and was started in 1982 by Sir Douglas Haig, who sadly died this year, but has been very much a supporter of the programme during the whole time. I am the 3rd director of the programme, and I'm proud of the fact that we use the tutorial mechanism. It's very much a conversational programme. It's not one of case studies or lectures particularly. We have an extraordinary diversity on the programme, drawing from so many different countries, and actually just looking at the countries you're calling in from today, we get such richness of conversation. On the programme we are all learners, all teachers, whether we're faculty or participants. I said earlier that I'm interested in drawing from the humanities faculties from across the university. The sort of leadership we're talking about is very human, and we use some of the great stories from the humanities, some of the great experiences, and also that interrogation of how we think, and also questions of judgment as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the webinar. It is the most senior leadership programme. We have several actually at the Business School. It's an open programme, but I think, Keith, you'd agree, it's a very personal programme. What we always say, and the group of tutors say, is that what's at the heart of the programme are people's individual stories, their individual challenges, their individual leadership questions, and everything else is in the service of that. And I suppose the heart of the programme is the tutorial, where those stories are exchanged and interrogated and walked around. It's also an experiential programme. We've spent a lot of time thinking about how people like you, so smart, expert, senior, busy people learn. And we've discovered that you learn by talking, learn by doing. And so there are some really new ideas that you'll encounter on the programme, some new conversations you'll have, but there's also some new experiences. And again, we'll talk about that towards the end. You'll become part of a world-class alumni group. We're enormously proud of our alumni and really love the fact that some of you are calling in today. And it's a programme that's constantly reworked, redesigned. We take very seriously the feedback that we get, but also the world is always changing. I'm right now just bringing to an end a redesign of November, and so it's a living thing. Move on just to say a couple of words about our approach to leadership, and perhaps why we feel the tutorial method is so effective. There's no Oxford model for leadership. It's not a kind of how-to programme. I think the people who come on the programme are largely in agreement that they're in a sort of post-heroic leadership world. They're interested in new ways of thinking. And so it's more about questions or new questions than about giving answers. So I think that the people who come on the programme are largely, and Katrin and David, you may have something to say about this, but sort of reflective practitioners, people who want to kind of step out of the stampede and walk around their leadership at a particular point in their lives, and think about the future. Yes, I sometimes say that actually people leave the programme lighter rather than heavier. They leave behind perhaps more than they take away. We can talk about that comment further on if you'd like. So it's about a collective, collaborative kind of leadership, and that is also the spirit of the programme. We talk about influence, less interested in positional leadership, and spend quite a bit of time thinking about meaning and purpose and values. And I just end here with a bullet point in understanding oneself. There are not psychometrics on the programme. People have often done psychometrics before they come. However, I think the understanding of self comes about again in the crucible of the tutorial through understanding how one is experienced by others, and having others give generous, friendly, objective feedback and help and support. This is a quote from John Lennox, and those of you who are alumni listening will remember John. And actually, this is not a picture of John at the top. This is Plato, in fact. And in the programme, he uses a piece of Plato to actually conduct an Oxford tutorial. And I asked him what he felt the Oxford tutorial was about. And he talked here about preparedness to take risks, to use one's imagination and one's creative powers, and to step out of your comfort zone. And it's a bit of a cliche, but just stepping out of one's leadership life into a different sort of forum. He talks about facing evaluation in the presence of their peers. That sounds rather strident and difficult. We are forensic on the programme, we are rigorous, but I would say it's in spirit, and again Keith, interrupt me if you, in spirit it's a kind, friendly programme, as we said in the title.
Yeah, don't worry, Tracy. I will demystify this in a minute and actually kind of get practical about what we do. But no, Tracy's absolutely right. It's the spirit.
And the tutorial isn't coaching. And again, forgive me for those of you who already know about how we deliver learning actually to students and undergraduates in the university. But for those who don't, it's just worth saying a word or two about the tutorial. Undergraduates at Oxford in 1s or in 2s will have an hour every week personally with their tutor, where they read out their essay and then talk about it, are questioned about it. They will have other ideas thrown in by the tutor. It's an iterative, Socratic back and forth. And as W.G. Moore here in this quote, previous fellow at St John's College said, it's more about dialectic than dogma. I think that's our home base at Oxford. It's kind of what we understand, and I think it's where we're at our best in questioning, inquiring, analysing, interpreting, rather than saying this is how you do it. So I think we're on home ground with the tutorial, but it comes very much out of the philosophy of the broader university. We're going to talk in a minute, Keith's going to talk much more eloquently than me about the tutorial, but just to say, the programme isn't all tutorials. There are many faculty that you will encounter during the course of the week who I like to think of as bringing very, very different lenses onto your leadership challenges and questions. The way they look at the world, just the language they use, the questions they ask, come at leadership from just different angles, which can be enormously revivifying and illuminating. So just in these pictures here, you can see on the left, you've got Peter, who's a conductor, John, who's a corporate psychologist, Tara, who's a neuroscientist, Richard, a theatre director, Rob is an improvisation guy, Miranda is an artist, and at the bottom, those keys, we actually worked with a blacksmith a couple of years ago. So different sorts of lenses, not all eclectic. You will also encounter, what sort of people you would expect to meet, professors of organisational behaviour, complexity science, designer this time we're going to have in November, an Olympic oarsman even, but we bring you very different sorts of lenses onto your leadership question. And also again, the tutorial is a place to make a bridge into relevance, so what for me out of these different sorts of lenses. Anyway, that's pretty much enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Keith to talk about what actually happens on the programme. This is a picture of him here. But to say we have 5 or 6 tutors on the programme. They are not all the same. They're quite an eclectic bunch, actually. So we have a psychologist, a brace of professors, one of organisational behaviour, one of strategy, an improvisation practitioner. And the great thing about that is that they work as a group. You do have a tutor, but you also have all the tutors with you all week. And I would say that we get to know everyone during the course of this intense week. So you have all of their perspectives as well. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now and hand over to Keith to talk about the tutorial.
Thanks, Tracy, and delight to be here, delight to talk to everybody. And I'm going to start actually by saying I do this with Tracy twice a year. 1 week May, 1 week November. The next one's coming up soon. And for me personally, and this is I think true of most of the tutors, it's actually what I would call a personal adrenaline kick. In other words, I turn up at the week a bit like a participant, and my most intriguing state is finding out who's coming, who's going to be on the course, and who's going to be in my group. And what happens to me during the week personally, which I think is a bit like the participants, is that I get a massive kick out of learning new things, learning about other people, and actually sharing ideas with other people. So I end up joining the group, and as Tracey says, the tutors stay with the whole programme the whole week, and we almost become part of the course, as are the participants. They are the course. So I kind of treat it a bit like that. So I've already started saying, who's on this call, Tracey? You know, what kind of people are interested in this? Which countries do they come from? And that's the way I tend to approach the process. Very quickly, I mean, as Tracey said, we're all a bit different. My background, I had 20 years in industry in a big consulting firm, came to Oxford in the 1990s, partly because I was inquisitive about the fact that we didn't really know the solutions to everything in business. And I did a doctorate, and I'm very interested in big, messy change and how it works. That's my own area of interest. But I do a lot of work with top teams, both here at Oxford and outside, acting as a facilitator, hence working on the tutor. The tutor groups themselves, the course is a week, and there's a lot of sessions on it where the whole group do all kinds of different things. But the tutor group is a subgroup of 5 to 7 people, usually very diverse. We don't like people the same in each group. And the tutor group stays and meets together during the week, maybe every day for an hour or so, and certainly on the first day. And it's, in a sense, a private subset of the whole class that allows, in a much more intimate and friendly and quieter way, in their own room, to throw around the ideas and things that have been going on during the week. So if I was to summarise the purpose of the tutor group, it's, first of all, you are going to get a lot of inputs from lots of different things, a lot of different experiences. And what we like to do in the tutor group is to reflect on that and say, well, what did you make of that? What on earth did that mean to you? And usually that gets into some arguments and disputes about, well, what were these sessions all about? You know, we might run a session on complexity, or a session on global issues facing the world, which might, you know, wind a lot of people up. And so we use the time in the tutor group to reflect on that. Secondly, and most importantly, everybody comes with their own challenge, their own issues, both personally, perhaps organisationally, and a real purpose in the time in the tutor group is to take the ideas that might be coming out during the week and say, well, what does that mean for us individually? How does that fit our own challenges? Can we use this? Is it useful? What does it mean for me personally back in my day job? And finally, the objective, again, the tutor group, and this goes back, as Tracey said, to the Oxford tradition, is that you're using your tutor group, and not just the tutor, you're using the tutor group to get help, to challenge, and to actually test out ideas and share with a group that don't know you in your normal life, but they find out and work with you in the week as what we called here friendly strangers. And I think that's a very good way of putting it. And I'm sure Catherine and David a bit later will tell you a little bit about their own experience. So I'm trying to demystify this. This is not some grand academic process. It's actually a way of sharing ideas and getting time together to really see what makes a difference. So if I looked at, very briefly, what happens during the week, and just give you a couple of examples. And the first important thing is, you all arrive usually on a Sunday. Sunday's a great day to arrive in Oxford. And then after getting you warmed up a bit, we go into our tutor group for the first time. And so, and in fact, David will mention this, he was in my group in the last session. And we spend an hour just introducing ourselves. Now, that might sound a bit silly, But people turn up to this course, you know, shy, from different countries, with suits of armour on, you know, saying, I don't want to expose myself. And the starting point is we have to get everybody to share a bit about who they are. And the most useful thing is to talk a bit about yourself, but also opening up what some of your challenges are in your work environment and perhaps personally as leaders. So we may get a big diversity here. Last time we had a senior Australian civil servant, a man from a democracy in Africa that was trying to reform its parliament. We had an insurance person, that's David. We had a senior partner from a big Middle Eastern engineering firm. We had 2 women, 5 men in my group. They're all different, but they actually, when they start sharing, start realizing that they've got very similar issues, but in very different contexts. And they start talking about it. So day one we do that, but then as we do during the week, we can start doing 2 things. One is that we might use a session that we just heard in the main classroom to stimulate a debate. And I mentioned one where we do something, Professor Gareth Morgan does something on complexity and complex systems, and getting you to understand that, you know, you're not in control of everything, you're part of the system, and you work with disturbance. Now, for someone in our group last time who was from a big university innovation spin-out company, started realizing that the world he was in was, you just couldn't understand, too complicated. The university, the world he was in, innovation, changing all the time. And the idea being that as a leader, you realize that and you think, how can I cope differently if I take a different view of that situation? The final part that we do, that I'd like to mention during the week, and again, our 2 colleagues may pick up on this, is that everybody does bring their own issues. And what I try and do in my tutor group, and I think the others do the same, is to give everybody a chance during the week to perhaps get a little bit more time on their issues. And if we get that right, the rest of the tutor group acts as a self-help group. And you end up almost sitting in a chair in the middle of the group, and it feels a bit like a clinic, but they're friendly strangers, and they actually really do want to help and listen and give ideas, and they're not competitors. And as we go through the group and everybody gets to know each other, it works very, very well. My job is provocateur, facilitator, and getting the whole thing going. So finally, follow up, and 1 minute on this. We don't stop with the course. One thing the tutors do is talk to everybody a few weeks later about what happened, how did it work, and what reflections they have. And usually that is between, well, it changed my life. I mean, there's a few of those. But more about it changed some of my ideas about me and about my perspective as leaders. It also gave me some things I tried out. I actually started doing some new things, some new experiments. And finally, it may actually provoke more inquisitiveness about trying out some finding out new things, actually coming back to the university, talking to other faculty, maybe even talking to other tutor group members offline later. So hopefully that's a bit of a flavour of what really happens. But I think, Tracey, you don't want to get some real input from the troops, yes?
You don't want to believe him, yeah. David and Katrin, we're just now unmuting you. We put you on mute before because otherwise we got some feedback on the system. But are you both there now? Can you?
Yes,
yeah, great. Okay, fantastic. Well, it is a great pleasure, and thank you so much for giving your time to welcome both of you to this webinar. As I said earlier, Katrin is, let me just push that aside, is Head of Public Affairs at Bertelsmann and is in Berlin at the moment. David from Allianz is here in rainy UK. And perhaps, Katrin, if I start with you and just ask you, listening to me and Keith talking about how we think it is, if you could just say a little bit about your experience of the tutorial when you were here in May.
Well, yes, I'd love to. When I
Well, thank you, Katrin. And actually, just picking up on, I mean, Keith talked about as well the tutorial as being a place where together in a smaller group you sort of thrashed out some of the perhaps more controversial or challenging or interesting ideas from the faculty outside the tutorial. Did you feel that that was a useful forum, and do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I think it was extremely useful. I think Rob sort of provoked us very much in the first day by making us play these improvisation games and everything is an offer. That whatever happens, you turn it into something positive or try to make the best out of it. And I felt that that was a very helpful concept that I look at regularly. And then also what you mentioned, Gareth talking about your possibility on only changing so much. So really the necessity of focusing on what you can truly change, then also the relevance of pause and also proactively deciding on what you're not going to do. I think those things really stuck with me and are accompanying me ever since the program.
Katrin, I'll come back to you if I can, but I wonder if I can, so David, you are actually in Keith's tutorial, so you can tell us if what he's saying is just not true at all. Would you like to just reflect for a little moment on what the tutorial was like for you?
Well, I was certainly echo everything that Katrin and Keith said. And I think the interesting thing to me is that the tutorial was in the mix of the whole program, and I think it's very carefully sort of sequenced within that program, so the full benefits of it.
David, there's a...
What struck me is that a lot of these institutes have, all sorts of advisors.
David,
David, hang on a second.
sorry, David, sorry to interrupt there. Hi, David, can you hear me?
David, just hang on a second. You've got a lot of echo going on your end.
Yeah, me too.
Have you got a phone on or anything, or no?
Have you got your phone on loudspeaker? That might be the problem.
Is that better?
Yes,
Yeah,
it is.
much
Terrific.
Great.
Wonderful.
We heard most of it. Let's just have a quick go.
Shall I just recap?
Yeah,
Yes,
that would be
please.
great, thank you.
So essentially, I think for me that the strength of the tutorial approach, and I definitely echo what Katrin and Keith just said, but the strength is the way it sits within this program. I was really impressed with the mix of elements that have been put together on the program as a whole, and I think for me the tutorial is kind of key to unlocking the benefits as the program builds, and there seems to be a really, I guess because it's such an established program, but there's a really clever sequencing of content, and the tutorial really helps you reflect, and as Keith and Katrin described, challenge yourself around some of that content. I would also just underline the point that Katrin made, I think, which is that it isn't just that you get these friendly strangers, as you called them, commenting and observing and challenging on your issue, but it's your contribution and thinking about their challenges that I found when I got back into the company I work for. It helped me in applying a different questioning approach that was much more constructive, yet hopefully more insightful. So I think it's a bit of a cliche, but I think it was more what you give in those tutorials was always more important than what you take at the time from other people's advice. So I thought that's an important point. I think the other thing I was just mentioning is, I think these days people, particularly the sort of senior leaders that I was fortunate enough to meet on the program, tend to have lots of voices around them, from coaches to consultants, mentors, NEDs, you name it. And a tutorial for me was all of those, kind of concentrated experience that gave you, a real richness of insight and that provocation that Keith mentioned. And I think, it's not fair to say that over time during a very intensive week, those friendly strangers, you kind of become critical friends almost, and that's a real advantage, I think.
Thank you, David. I just want to pick up on one of your points, but before I do that, I wonder if anyone listening now, if what we've said, the four of us, give rise to any particular questions, as I said, about the tutorial or about the programme itself, do start typing them in the box, and we've got sort of 25 minutes or so when we can answer them for you. So we'd be really delighted if you would type any questions or comments. But David, if I could go back to you, and Keith, you do feel if you want to ask any questions as well. I would imagine those people on the call who are thinking potentially of coming on the programme, or are definitely coming on the programme in November, are interested. You talked about the benefits of the programme, and I wonder if you would say, now, several months out, looking back, and Catherine, I'll come to you perhaps with this question as well. Distilling that out, what have the benefits been for you? What have you taken away? I mean, what's changed, if I could push you on that?
I think, well, for me, Tracey, I think it gives you this opportunity, I think as you described, to move around the issues from a different perspective. So I found, well, sometimes it seemed quite daunting, significant business issues in the company I work for. I was suddenly looking at from a different perspective, and perhaps it was the way I was using some of the techniques that we were able to kind of test out in a safe environment in the tutorial. But those have helped me kind of unlock some answers against some issues we have in our business to really good and practical effect. I mean, I think it's kind of for me, it's a little bit ironic that I thoroughly enjoyed the Professor John Lennox's tutorial session you mentioned, which in a sense could have been the most sort of philosophical, but actually gave me the most practical benefit in approaching challenges back in the workplace in a different way. So I think for me, there have been some very practical business benefits in getting a new take on leadership that's been prompted by this.
Thank you, David. And actually, it's very helpful to say there have been some very practical things. I think sometimes from the outside, it seems a bit esoteric, the programme, or a little bit fanciful in its reach. But I do think that people say that actually there's been some real practical change that's happened as a result of it. I can see some questions starting to come up on the screen, but I wonder if I could just turn to you, Catherine, before I turn to those. And ask you the same question. I know you've been on many leadership programs, and you're very thoughtful about the efficacy of these things. What was the benefit to you going back into the workplace of being on this program?
Yes, well, I can echo very much what David actually just said now. I thought it was a fascinating learning journey, especially in the field of leadership as behavior, as emotional intelligence, and the art of building relationship as presented by John. And really, I think he really managed to inspire us to be all more inspiring. And that was done in a very practical way, and done in a way that you really felt you could take it away from there, and you really you knew yourself also better, as you, Tracey, mentioned before. Understanding oneself is really something that I took away from the course, and I felt it was sort of understanding the leadership of myself with my head, heart, and gut. So really like a whole heart better understanding.
Thank you. That's a great answer. I'm going to just turn now, and I may turn back to both of you to ask you some of these questions as well, and Keith too, to some of the questions that are being typed in for us now. And if I take the first question, which is, apart from tutorials, do you have syndicate or case studies sessions? And if I just begin with that, and Keith or anyone else just add anything. Over the years, I've found that when we use business case studies, because there is such diversity in the group, people from public and private sector, they are successful, but it seems to engage a different part of the brain in a way, a kind of more sit back, evaluative, well, I'm the public sector, this is a private sector case, or this is about something that's in a different industry from mine. So we tend to use, for example, on the May programme, we did use a case study of sorts, but it was the Shakespeare play Hamlet. And actually, by using a play as a case study for leadership, for judgment, new questions, and so on, we have found over the years that it seems to unleash a different kind of learning. I don't know if you want to say anything, Keith, about.
Well, no, I think it's interesting that I did my MBA at Harvard many years ago, and of course you do 1,000 case studies, and we also find a lot of people that come on this program have done leadership and business and strategy courses. So Tracey's right. Where we use case studies, I say they're leadership case studies rather than business case studies. But that would also, not just, for example, using Shakespeare, but I mentioned Gareth Morgan on complexity, that Gareth is introducing ideas of how you look at a business with a different lens of looking at it as a system and as a complex system. But he will use examples of businesses and innovations and change that are practical examples, and will challenge the group with, well, what do they think about that? And then ask the group in small groups, which is your syndicate question, to actually work through how does that apply to you. So this is in the classroom. This is not tutor groups, this is in Gareth's class. So the classes are all done in different ways, but very participative, different styles, different methods, and the power of the course is, I think, the different approaches to using this. Can I just, I'm going to check, but Karen and David, any comments about that at all?
Yeah, Keith, I'd echo that again. I think the whole thing about the leadership for me is a very personal journey, and some of the learning from the program, I think it was all the more applicable in that you thought it through in terms of your own leadership style and how that can fit to the situation you come back to, rather than trying to fit another business case to your business case or your organisation's challenges. It's how you as an individual tackle that, and I think do that in a way that is unique to you and authentic to you, that has been thought through. And for me, that's hopefully made for a more robust and versatile approach to leadership than perhaps the one I had before the programme.
Very good.
Thank you. I'll turn to the second question, and Katrin, maybe I'll ask you this one first, and then we can comment as well. And the question is, what is the most effective preparation for the programme beyond identifying individual challenges? What would you say?
That's a good question. I think really the best preparation is to have an open mind, to be curious, to be prepared to occasionally step out of your comfort zone, but be calm and soothed, because it's a nice, elegant journey between comfort zones and non-comfort zones, and then, be ready to explore. I think you don't need to prepare especially, but you'll have a great week.
I think that's a great answer, that preparedness to be open and almost preparedness to kind of put aside one's expertise, and kind of leave it at the door in a sense, and step into a state of unknowing and curiosity and questioning about one's own business, about others as well, and a preparedness for a bit of give and take. We do, however, send out some pre-reading. Each of the faculty will suggest some, it's not like you have to write essays or anything like that, but it's some bits of pre-reading just to get kind of the juices flowing and you starting to think about some of the ideas that they will present to you. But I think Katrin's answer is the best one, actually, to come open and prepared to engage.
And hopefully come with your daily work delegated to someone else.
Yeah, that actually is true. not planning to live a parallel life. And when we do, sadly, because people are so busy, have people come who, you know, just have to get up at 4 in the morning to do their 200 emails. And actually, you know, if there is any way that you can delegate to your team just for a week to kind of leave you be, I think you do get more out of the program if you can have that luxury and discipline.
Can I just pick up, and this is linked with another question that someone's put in, about the preparation. They talk about their own challenge, but also during the week, how do we make sure that the time is structured for everybody to have a say and to get their time on their issues? I'd take a couple of things. First of all, you don't have to do massive essays in advance, but we do ask everybody to think about their own personal challenges and some of their organisational challenges and write it down in advance. It doesn't have to be very long because it gets you thinking about the subjects we're interested in. However, one of the points about, I think, what happens on this programme is that very often the challenge you thought you had changes during the week. In other words, and this is classic with adaptive leadership and complex leadership, is that, you know, you thought the problem was X, you thought the problem was the board of directors or the strategy of the company, and you find in fact that the problem may have been to do with people, it may have been to do with what you were doing within it. So you potentially reframe the challenge. And that links with the question that was asked here about how do we make sure you get time to have your say during the week. That is the art of the tutor group and the art of the facilitator, the tutor group leader, is to make sure everybody gets as much equal input and sharing as possible, but also that at one point during the week it becomes appropriate for you to spend more time on yours. Now, I tend to do that by watching it carefully during the week, and of course 1 or 2 people don't come forward that easily, and we get to it in the end, and we work on making sure there is time during the week to have a go at it. The job of the facilitator is to make sure it's fair, but also that it isn't a grilling session, it's just an opportunity to share and help each other.
And could I add to that as well? When I'm thinking about this programme, I always think of 24-hour design. And for me, because we have such interesting participants on the programme, the breaks are just as important as the sessions, and the conversations that you have, you know, at the bar or at lunch, you know, are just as important. And the faculty tend to stay around, stay for a meal. The tutors are there all week. I'm there all week. There is an opportunity to have all sorts of one-on-one conversations. We divide up the groups as well. We split them in 2. There are options, and in fact in November there are going to be even more options. So I think, you know, it's quite rare that one is sitting in a bank lecture theatre just sort of listening to someone else's voice. David, do you feel that's fair? He's gone.
Yes, absolutely. I think I was impressed by the sort of generosity of everyone giving their time. I think the point Keith made earlier, you feel you are the course. I felt that was very much embraced by all the tutors as well, and there was a very adult-to-adult conversation going on throughout, which is good. And I remember I said, I think you get this sense of critical friends who are being very open and very respectful of everyone's personal journey on the programme. It's all the richer for that. So I think it's a very well-paced programme, and it's also it's in a fantastic environment. And I thought the way that the Oxford environment was kind of leveraged to reinforce some of the learnings along the way and just get people thinking about their own challenges, I thought was particularly effective for me.
Tracey, can I just pick up on one question that's just come up on the screen, which actually is written in a very peculiar way, and it says that something that's just been about time on the course. Is this the right course for me? Perhaps for someone who's about to retire and hopefully start a new life. Can I just make a comment? I'm going to broaden that a bit, but a lot of people that come on the OSLP are interestingly at points in their careers where they are perhaps looking for a reflection and re-energizing as well. And this could be maybe someone that's just about to hopefully take on a chief executive's job. It could be someone that's actually done a certain job and career so far and are thinking of moving into a different part of the company or a different part of the world or maybe a different company. And so re-energizing and thinking and reflecting on your own repertoire and your own mindset for the next stage of you, I think is a common factor in the course. Now, you might introduce the word retiring. I have a debate with a lot of my friends about this. There is no such thing as retiring. And in fact, strangely, we run another course here for chief executives who are all moving into different kinds of executive roles in charities, government, advisory roles, non-executives, all kinds of things. And they need a new take on thinking about leadership. So I think the point I'm making is that it may well be a lot of people are reflecting on how what they've done so far arms them for the next stage of their journey, and what can they use to really turbo boost that next stage. And it may be something very different.
Thank you. There's another question here that actually links to what you said as well, David, about the flow of the week and the sort of rhythm of the week, I suppose. How do you create the flow of the program during the week to meet the needs of the participants? We think a lot about, I think Katrin used the word journey, and we think a lot about where things happen and why. And I always think about a rhythm of the day, in fact, that somehow one needs intellectual stimulus, first thing in the morning, and largely the kind of difficult ideas belong there. There is a sense in the middle of the day of, coming together, perhaps in a tutorial group and really, thrashing through the meaning of things. And then towards the end of the day, the more experiential doing, engaging the hand and the spirit and the heart and going out and stepping into different sorts of environments. The week itself, I think, also moves from kind of, we begin, Keith talked about really thinking about drawing on the whole university, on how our context is changing, really looking out into the future. So it begins out there, and by the end of the week, it becomes, I think, more and more interior, more and more personal, more and more focused on the individual, or at least that's how I intend the flow of the week to go. I mean, Katrin, did it feel like that to you?
That feels absolutely like it. And what I also felt that what was quite amazing is that this week is incredibly intense on so many levels. And at the same time, what really happens at the end of the week is that you do feel lighter after this incredibly intense week, which sounds like that's a weird combination, but it really works. And what I also felt, actually, what was very helpful to me, which you haven't mentioned yet, is these storytelling exercises always at the beginning of the morning. It's a reflection by yourself, the writing with your hands of stories, and the importance of storytelling, which you have very well sort of established in this program. That was very essential for me too.
Thank you. Yes, what Katrin's referring to there is just this daily practice. In May, being led by a novelist, actually, Rebecca Abrams, of writing or rewriting one's own story of leadership in a way that feels perhaps more authentic than one's CV has come to be, or just rewriting one's journey, I suppose, in a way that allows one to look back at the journey of your life to where you've got to be in a more helpful way, and just to reflect again on the important moments of change, and also to reflect forwards too. So that practice of writing, and we have around the edge of the programme as well, we do think about resilience, about the whole body also. There's an opportunity to do yoga if you want. None of these things are compulsory, but to go out and train with an Olympic medalist. And I think that we try and look at leadership in the round, and not just in the head. Keith, there's a question here. What is the mix of participants like on the programme? What sorts of sectors, roles, country of work? We've touched on that a bit. Do you want to?
Yeah, I think well, it's very simple things, very sort of factual things to answer. You know, if you have a group of 30 odd people, I think we end up most occasions with more than 20 nationalities out of more than 30 people, and that tells you something. And that's nationalities from, I would say, all worlds. I don't like using first, second, third world, emerging markets or anything else. It's all of them. And that's the first point. The second point is that ever since we've run the OSLP, it has a really interesting, almost equal mixture of private sector, public sector, and then almost third sector, universities, health systems, charities, NGOs as the sort of third sector. And it's one of these classic things that if you get this right, you get far more from that kind of sharing than you do from anybody just working in your own sector or your own industry. So the sectors could be banking, engineering, food, you name it, energy. But I'd say the diversity, there's different courses you can go on for different things, but this would be definitely one where you're opening up your mind. Catherine and Dave, any kind of final sort of thoughts on the group that you met and what that meant?
Well, absolutely. It's been amazing, and it's been the most international group and the most diverse group I've been ever on in any kind of these kinds of settings of these leadership programs, and I found it incredibly enriching and quite amazing, also in terms of how different we are and how same we are, which is also a very interesting experience. At the end of the day, the challenges don't differ so greatly as you would think, looking at the different age groups, regions coming from, the different sectors we're coming from.
Thank you both. And David, anything from you? Yes, final thoughts from you.
No, I just echo that. I mean, this is not like a program where you look for people from the same sort of sector, the same type of company. It's a much more personal thing, and that kind of mix is really one of the great strengths of it for me.
Thank you both so much. I'm conscious of the time and I'm conscious of everyone's diaries. We said we'd finish at 3 UK time. I would like to hand over to Shing-Wai Wong, who's just going to talk just a little bit about the practicalities of future programs for those who are on the call, who are thinking of registering or are coming in November. But meanwhile, just if I can say thanks so much for calling in. Thank you for everyone who took part in the webinar. It's been great. And thank you, Keith, as well for joining in. So, Shing, can I pass to you?
Yes, absolutely. And it's been absolutely lovely to hear from everybody and all the questions that have popped up. A lot of familiar names there, so good to see that we're in good company. The next programme, as Tracey mentioned and Keith as well, we have 2 programmes a year. The next programme will be taking place in November, 15th to the 20th. Echoing what David, Catherine, Tracey and Keith said, We've got a multitude of sectors coming on, ranging from, you know, we've got people confirmed from international governments, consulting firms, retail, metals and mining, education, automotive, finance, just some examples. We're looking to have a really great group this November. So if you do want to participate, please do let me know. We have a multitude of really stuff out there. A lot more from Keith, a lot more from Tracey, you know, some new films. So really happy to share and engage in a discussion with you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Well, thank you again from me. I'm Gemma from the marketing team here. So thank you very much for your time today. I hope you found it useful and thought-provoking. You will be receiving a recording and a copy of the slides either tomorrow or Wednesday morning. So you'll be able to review in your own time. And if you have any questions after that, the contact details for Shing will be on that email as well as the slides, so you can come through directly to Shing to ask any questions you might have. And I hope you have a lovely rest of the afternoon. I hope it's sunny where you are. It's improving a little in Oxford, and we look forward to you are joining us even on the next webinar, which we'll be hosting early next year. Thanks ever so much. Goodbye.